A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the latest installment from the Game of Thrones series by George R. R. Martin, has came and gone, and what a series it was. Let's just dive in and discuss it. We're back in the Seven Kingdoms, and I'm happy about it. Welcome back to Collard Greens TV, your favorite nerd channel. I am your host, King, and this is the greatest co host in the Seven Kingdoms, JC3. And as you can see today, I mentioned the Seven Kingdoms because we are covering A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the latest installment from the Game of Thrones series. And I'm happy about it. Now, interesting fact before we get too far here, this story is going to take place 80 years after House of the Dragon and about 70 to 80 years before Game of Thrones. So, for all of you, we're going to go through some heavy spoilers. Feel free to stop here, watch the show, come on back, and then finish here. But if you're ready to get down with this, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends. Join us in the comments because we would love to hear your thoughts on A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So let's kick it off with our overall thoughts. And Jay, tell us, what was your overall thoughts of this new series?
Well, King, as you mentioned, man, this series takes place about 100 years before the Game of Thrones events, and one of the cool things about this show is you really don't need to have watched Game of Thrones or House of Dragons to watch this six-episode series, just because it's very grounded. A lot of the fantasy has been taken out of the show. We don't have dragons, we don't have magic, we don't even have White Walkers. But what we do have are very endearing characters that I personally loved following throughout this whole show. We're following Ser Dunk, who unfortunately has lost a knight, his knight, one of his mentors. And we follow him as he goes through the back roads of Westeros, as he's trying to enter into a jousting tournament so that he can actually become a knight. And as we're following him through this journey, he comes across this little, bald boy named Egg, and we don't know too much about him. He's very wise in the art of knighthood and whatnot, but we really don't know how until the series goes farther. But as you see these two characters just interacting with each other, you get that big brother, little brother type of, bond with them. And that's honestly what just really made the show for me. We had some supporting characters in here with Sir Lionel Baratheon. I thought he was a very good character. Also, a surprise character that I really ended up enjoying was Baylor, House Targaryen. Those characters really surprised me in many ways that we'll talk about later. But overall, as a show, I was surprised just because, again, this is fantasy free. So I didn't know what to expect. But what I got was a very good story about two underdogs just trying to make it in this gloomy world of Westeros.
That's what I actually think they did best with this show was give us more storytelling of two people in the beginning of the story who seem kind of utterly regular. We meet Dunk, and Dunk is a knight, but he's a hedge knight, which means he has no lord, he has no people, he has no house. He's just a knight, and they essentially call them hedge knights because they sleep in hedges and they just go to where duty's needed. And so we kind of pick up with some regular people and him meeting Egg, who at the time seems very unassuming and just some regular kid who's really smart beyond his years. You don't really know why in the beginning, but he just seems like he kind of knows more than he should. That dynamic was great. The show allowed itself to breathe a little bit. Like you said, there wasn't any magic or dragon or White Walkers, even though we know the White Walkers are steadily coming towards Westeros at this point in the story, but they don't focus on that. And this show allowed them to do something that I haven't seen them do before in the other two, House of Dragon and Game of Thrones, which was allow this show to have more levity. It was funnier than most of the other shows. There was moments where they allowed the characters to be funny, laugh, and be a little more jovial than you would see in the older series. And that's because in the other series, you're kind of dealing with more heavy war, where in this one, you're just seeing a guy trying to come up and be a knight and make something of himself. So overall, I loved the show. I thought it was really good. I thought it was a good installment. I guess I'll add one little nitpick. I wish it was longer. Like I mentioned at the top, this is only an 8 episode series, and they were 30-minute episodes. I didn't even realize that as I was watching it that it was only 30 minutes, but they were going by really quickly. I think they could have served themselves a little bit better doing a hour long episode, and at least 8 to 10 would I think serve them better. But I thought it was a great show. I had a lot of fun with these characters, and I can't wait to see what they necessarily do next. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of your favorite characters. My favorite character standing out easily was Egg, and maybe what's his name, Lionel Baratheon. What was yours? What are some of the standout characters for you?
Standout character for me, honestly, man, it was Sir Dunk. My man is just so dim-witted, but he means well. He's just trying to get by. It's just, you know what I mean. It's just him in a world full of these great houses where everybody is just looking down on him. Even little girls in castles will look at him and just call him stupid. Like this is a very brutal world that he lives in. But he takes it all in stride. He's as kind as he can be to everybody that he comes across. The journey that he goes through and just trying to see if anybody knows his mentor's name, like just little stuff like that. It just really endears you to the character and it makes you want to see him win. Like you, another favorite character of mine was Egg. Just he looks so innocent, but you can also tell that there's just something more to him. Like there's not necessarily a rage, but something that some people like kind of fear. Like there's moments in the show where there are people who think that they recognize him, but it's that pause that they take just to say like, hey, is that is that like the prince, is that the prince dude? But like, but it's very cool just to see him evolve as a character, going from someone who's lying to like lying to somebody just to try to be somebody's squire. But you see his evolution and how he can squire. You see him training the horse for Sir Dunk. You see him finding people to take up for Sir Dunk when he ends up having to go into that tourney where he has to find 6 people to help him. Just little things like that just really show how handy that character can be. But we also get answers on that character later that just adds so much depth and just craziness with him, honestly.
I love that no matter what age of Game of Thrones or the world that you're in, the Baratheons are always going to drink and party. That is what they do. That from the second episode, that boy was getting faded. He was having a good time. He was dancing around, partying and roughhousing. He's just a fun character, and it seems like House Baratheon is just fun people over there. The world building that they extended, there was some really dope moments when they here comes all of the Targaryens into the chat. You know what I mean? And their armors are lit. Like for some reason the set design just gets better and better every year, and House of the Dragon had some dope outfits and armors, but this one really stole the cake and reminded you that the Targaryens, even though this is after House of the Dragon, they're still major players and they still should be paid attention to. And I kind of want to go back to what you said about Egg. Egg definitely carries that thing where people kind of have that, is he? Is that him? And they kind of have this trepidation. And you can kind of tell something's up because he seemingly knows more than what he should know. At least any lone-born child that was born, in squalor wouldn't have known those things. And our first clue is when Dunk asked him, "Hey, you were born at Flea Bottom," and he was like, "No, no, I wasn't," because he was born in the Red Keep. And
Yeah.
the reveals, we get quite a few reveals, but let me ask you before I say it. I'm going to let you. What was your favorite reveal?
Oh, my favorite reveal is when we found out that old boy Egg wasn't sick, which I thought he was, up until like the end of episode 3. But when we find out that this boy is the Prince Aegon Targaryen, the The ending of episode 3 really, like, encapsulated, like, my emotions with how I felt with the reveal, the sound, the switching back and forth between the people that were involved in that scene, and they're just like just have that look on their faces. I'm just like, what? Like, are you serious? That's how you know everything. And it also makes it cool to rewatch the show because then you'll notice certain things leading up to episode 3 that kind of give you a hint of who he really is, to his brother Arian going out jousting, and he's instantly like, oh, kill him. Like you don't, and then again, with the scene where he's going off to look at the dragon show while Sir Dunk goes with his friend to drink, but then his friend realized, like, takes a little double take and is like, "Is that? Oh, not that's whatever." But you kind of get these hints, and it's like by the time you get to that moment in episode 3, you're like, "Wow, that's some mighty good writing right there." But what about you? What was a shocking moment for you?
That probably was one of them. When that happened and he stopped the knights from, when he stopped the knights from breaking Dunk's teeth,
Oh
and
yeah,
and then you found out he's the prince. In that moment, I went back in my head and remembered every little detail of the things that kind of gave you the clue, like him knowing more than he should, knowing highborn information about whose houses are what and who should be in what houses. And this is stuff that people who grew up at Flea Bottom would not know. Somebody who was taught and educated would know this. And I kept getting those little things together and I go, it was right in front of our face. And the best reveal, though, was when he told his brother, "Nah, I shaved my head. I don't want to look like you." He hates his brother. And then, like you mentioned, he every time we saw the Targaryens, he was like, kill them or had disdain for them. And he has disdain for his brother. For our viewers who didn't know this, I had a couple friends who also didn't know. If you go back to Game of Thrones and we go to the wall where Jon Snow was, there was an old man in his late, probably 80s, and his name was Maester Aemon. And later on, you found out that that Maester is a Targaryen. That is Egg's brother, his older brother. Later on, they asked them where his family is, and he says that one of them is off at Hightower or at Old Town, excuse me, studying to be a maester. Well, that's the guy we know from the original show. And in the original show, there's a moment where he says, Egg, I had a dream. I was old. And that was almost before he passed away. He was getting senile and he was reliving this moment talking to his little brother Egg. So one of the best reveals, the biggest reveal for me that I did not see coming was later on in the last episode, we learned that Dunk's knight or his mentor, he never actually knighted him. He's been saying he's a hedge knight, but he technically has never been knighted. And that's probably another reason why he's trying so hard to get into one of the houses, whether it be Baratheon, Targaryen, or any of them. He's really looking for a real title as a knight, which he's not. And that kind of was sad. That was a sad realization that I did not see coming.
yeah, that, like when we see that scene, you're like, oh, like, but it, honestly, it just makes you root for him even more. You know what I mean? Like, just to see everything that Sir Dunk had went through in this whole show, even down to just trying to get a new shield, painted and made for him, and then the unbelievable violence that he went through in the jousting tournament. Like let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, again, this show is free of fantasy, but best believe we still got the violence. We still got, as my man said, the dark humor. We still have whoring. We even have a full frontal, scene in this show that thought that I was back in, 28 years later. But back to Duncan though, he just Sir Dunk was just such a great character in this show that by the time he gets through with that jousting tournament and my man's eye is all swollen up and he's beaten down with all these injuries, you just think to yourself, now that is indeed a true knight.
I didn't think that Egg's brother was going to die there. Another reveal that happens during the battle, as Jade mentioned earlier, Egg was helping Dunk get a group of men to battle up against Egg's brother because he felt besmirched when Dunk slapped the taste out of his mouth earlier in the series. So they needed to have this joust and this fight. This almost reminds me a little bit of the Battle of the Bastards energy. It was brutal. It was a brutal scene, well shot, as Game of Thrones always does. Is have these well battled scenes where it was so much going on and you're getting this backstory in the middle of it. Dunk is confused. He's on the battlefield. He's less experienced than some of the people there. When it's all said and done, the Targaryen that helped him out, its name is mistaking me at the moment. He takes off his hat, and y'all, he's missing the whole back of his head.
Baylor
That
is out.
Baylor, there we go. Thank you, Baylor. He was one of the most interesting characters and more reasonable Targaryens we have seen in a very long time. The sad thing about him dying, and then of course his brother being like, no matter what, everybody's going to say that I killed my brother and I have to live with that.
Yeah, that scene alone, that was the shocking part of the end of episode 5, was seeing that, just because, like you said, he was one of the few people that ever took up for Sir Dunk. He had been trying to help Sir Dunk throughout, majority of the show. Like, even when Sir Dunk was put in that impossible situation of helping that girl, whose finger got broke by Arya, and helping her with that. And he even took it upon himself to, ask him, like, how much of a knight are you? Like, are you a true knight? Because it was his idea to tell Sir Dunk, to tell the courts, I would like a trial by combat. So even in those moments, he was trying to help Sir Dunk. So to see him go out like that in such a brutal and painful way, I just reminded myself that, hey, this is still a Game of Thrones spinoff, and in Game of Thrones shows, we have brutal deaths, and this was indeed one of them.
Game of Thrones notoriously, for people who are Game of Thrones adjacent or getting into it, if you were going to start Game of Thrones, the one thing you need to learn is all your favorite characters could die. Nobody is
Yeah,
safe in this show.
no,
And a lot of those shows, excuse me, take some big liberties with getting rid of a bunch of those people. So anytime you like somebody, take it with a grain of salt. If the show is not named after them, they might die. A fun conclusion to the show. They win the battle. Dunk wins. His team wins. They're good to go. He somewhat gets his freedom, and then they ask him to go ahead and take Egg on for real, as his squire. And he's like, "I'm done with Targaryens and princes. I'm done with princes." Eventually, he comes around, and they have this beautiful kind of walking off into the sunset, definitely telegraphing that this is the beginning of what is going to be later on Duncan Egg's adventures. And this is just the first chapter in that adventure. What were your thoughts a little bit on the conclusion of the story?
I love the conclusion of the first season, just because it showed how much of a bond that Sir Dunk and Egg have built throughout this whole show. Uh, it gets to a point in the episode where, as you said, like Sir Dunk, he says, "I'm done with princes," but then he gets the realization later on in the episode that if he doesn't be big brother to Egg, if he does nothing and then just goes on with his life, then Egg could become just another evil, devilish Targaryen. Like, he realizes that his brother could be somebody that breaks a woman's fingers. His brother could be somebody that spears a horse. Like, he sees what this boy could become, and he doesn't want that. So he decides to do the right thing and ride off into the sunset with Egg, as we see a glimpse of his former mentor, riding off, going his own way. And I thought that was a nice bookend to what is now, I think, known as a Knight of the Nine Kingdoms. And can't wait to see what's going on for season 2.
I'm right there with you. I can't wait till season 2 upcoming here in the next, I want to say, month or so. We're going to get House of the Dragon season 3, which of course we're covering it right here, so don't go nowhere because we're talking all the Game of Thrones stuff. I thought it was amazing. So I'm going to give my last final thoughts and then I'm going to kick it to Jay and he's going to give his final thoughts and take us on out. I would say if I was going to rate this show, which I like to pretend rate these shows, I would probably give it a 7. It was good. It was a fun show. I think it is something that I would absolutely recommend to people to watch. My lower score is only because I wish they gave us more. I wish they gave it us a little bit longer and gave us a little bit more in this world. But they did a nice job of giving us something very different than what we've seen before. It still is encompassed in this world. It still makes the same sense. The mechanics all work the same, but it slowed down. It let some laughs happen and it was a sweeter story than just moving around the nine kingdoms and figuring out who's going to be the king. So overall, I really enjoyed the show. I hope you guys watch it and come on back because we're going to talk about more. So Jay, take us on out. Give us your final thoughts and take us on out.
Like you, I really enjoyed this show. I thought it was great. I'll probably rate it 1 point higher than you. I'll probably give it an 8 out of 10. Just because with most shows, movies that I watch, if you subvert my expectations, then we're already on a good path. And this show subverted my expectations in a good way. We started off by seeing a guy burying his mentor. And right when we think he's about to just take up the heroic task of being a knight, he decides to take a crap behind a tree. Like so that alone, that breath of fresh air. It wasn't fresh out there, but for the show itself to give us that laugh and let us know we were in for something different, I totally appreciated it. And by the end of this season, we have a knight in Sir Dunk and a squire in Egg, and their bond and their journey just makes me excited to see what we have for season 2. And also just seeing how Egg evolves. We see how he struggled through this show. He had a brother who threatened to, snip him and make him a sister. And we saw the hate in his eyes as he almost killed his brother, after Sir Dunk beat him in the tourney. So I'm just really interested to see where that character goes and how this could branch off into future seasons, future shows. But hey, like my man said, we'll be here to cover it on the channel. Thank you guys for listening this whole time. Please like, share, subscribe, and as always, stay nerdy, my friends.